Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guests today are from Uncas Health District. They serve Norwich, Montville, Basra, Sprague, Lisbon, Griswold. My first guest is the Director of Health. His name's Patrick McCormick. It's his first time on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
For people who are not familiar with what a health district is, what is it?
So I'll give you the way I heard it when I first came to Connecticut, which was we're an unaffiliated, unincorporated, nonprofit organization that operates under general statute. Simple to understand, right?
Right.
So what we really are is what most people know is the environmental health piece. We're the local health department who does the food inspections and the septic and the wells and the campgrounds and the daycares. So that's the part most people know. We also have a public health nurse. Public health nurse has to review all the disease reports for everybody in our community. Make sure we don't have any disease outbreaks. So that's sort of the behind the scenes piece. We also do planning, a lot around emergency preparedness activities. So when we're planning for something, we're hoping it isn't going to happen.
Right.
And the potential is always there that it will. And then the last piece is the health education part. So we're out doing trainings, we're out doing classes, things like diabetes prevention, tobacco cessation, teen outreach program that we've had. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to go out there and prevent illness before it happens, and that's really our goal.
So a health district isn't necessarily a clinic for people to go in and for patients to go in and get served.
Correct.
Service,
and in fact, a lot of what we do is connect people with services. So if you're in a county in the South, your history with a Department of Health may be a county setup where they do have everything. It's sort of one-stop shopping. Here, what we do is more catered to what the community needs. And what we can't provide, we connect them to. So we may be doing flu clinics in one town, and another one they may say we use a different service. We may be doing inspections for homes to a certain extent in one town that doesn't require the same level in another town. So you may have a blight enforcement officer in Norwich, so they're going to handle a lot of those complaints around blight, where in another town they may say, look, you guys are all we really have, so if you're able to help us out, we'd appreciate it. So it's funny because we've had towns where they say, we never had a problem until you came to town. And my response to that is you never had the ability to get a hold of anybody to tell them what your problems were.
Good point.
So that's part of having a district health department is we have those supports for each other. What we can do is if somebody's out sick, we have somebody to fill in for them. If somebody's on vacation, we have somebody to fill in for them. If we need help, we know how to get help. And we're always there. We're 24/7 for emergencies, and we're 8 to 4:30 during the week. So people can reach out to us, and then we can find out what their issue is, and then we can respond to it as needed.
We blame you for this plague that has befallen us.
I will take complete responsibility as long as we're funded to solve the problem.
So a health district would lead you to believe that Connecticut is probably broken up into districts. Obviously, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you serve. How does it work as far as territories?
Right. So for those people that are in New London County with us, what they'll see is the Ledge Lake Health District, which is along the shoreline. They'll see us, the Uncas Health District, up in the northern tier of the county. We started back in 1988, and we had Norwich and Montville. Then I came in 2004, and since then we've added 6 additional towns. We expanded in 2007, and we added Basra and Sprague. And then in 2010, we added Griswold, Lisbon, and Voluntown. And just this year, in 2014, we added Salem. So what we're finding is the part-time towns, which are what other health departments are in the New London County area, those are generally a part-time sanitarian, maybe there a couple hours a week, a health director who oversees and signs off on paperwork, and that's really it. So while that may work for some towns, and I certainly have seen sanitarians that do a great job in those towns, I think the additional level of service and the additional supports that we provide make us hopefully a little bit more valuable than the option that they had in the past.
So as a health district, then, you have the ability to expand yourself to different towns, assuming that you feel that you have the ability to be able to serve them, correct?
Right. So it's interesting because we'll get calls from first selectmen who say, we're interested in getting the services, but we're really not sure what you offer. So generally we'll go in, we'll do a presentation, we'll see what they have needs for, and then we'll tell them what we can accommodate. It usually starts with a needs assessment. So what exactly is in the town? What services do you need? What history do you have of illness or needs in the community? From there, we tell them what the cost is. And in many cases, it is a little bit more expensive than what they paid in the past. So they have to see, is the cost and benefit going to match up? And if it's not, then they wait. If they do choose, they join the district. In some places, it's a town meeting, and other the selectmen or the legislative body will make a decision to join. And then they'll join for 2 years. They have to stick with us for 2 years and see if they like it. And then after 2, they can choose to leave us in December of the year that they choose to leave by the next fiscal year. So that allows us time to be able to accommodate that change and either lay people off or hire, move things around, so to speak. So there is a statutory way of doing it. But in reality, it's the people in the town that advocate for them joining us, which generally is what pushes things forward.
Now, the town pays for it, but are you also state funded as well?
So it's unique in Connecticut. What we get is state funding on a per capita basis. We get local funding on a per capita basis. We make money on licensure and fees. So if you get a septic permit, then that money obviously goes to pay for our time. And then we get grants. And historically, we've been about 40% grant funded. So the grants are really what offsets a lot of those administrative costs that we have. And we're always trying to respond to the needs, but we also are looking for those grants that can be 3-year grants, 5-year grants, things where we can actually sustain ourselves, have value to them. What we like to do is start out and do an assessment, see what the baseline is on a particular program, see change over time, and then at the end assess and see that we've actually made a difference. It's really hard in a 1-year grant, and in some cases, at least in the last few years, some of those 3- and 5-year grants turn into 1-year grants when the money goes away.
Yeah. Now, as far as back to the town paying for it, do they usually have to, if they decide or are expressing an interest in utilizing your services, do they usually need to budget the money? They have to vote on it? Maybe does it get to a point where the town, if it's a voting year, that there's a question on the ballot, do we want to spend money on Uncas Health District, that kind of thing?
Yep. So it's really based on the town charter, but in most cases, yes, they're voting. And it's funny how they do it, because sometimes they'll make a decision on what they have for a budget, and then they'll choose to join us, or they'll make a decision to join us, and then they'll make sure they have the money in the budget. But one way or the other, it has to happen consecutively. Yeah. The reality is that a lot of the costs associated with public health in these towns may not be as visible to people. They may use the building inspector secretary to do some of the health department work. They may make space available to the sanitarian. They may pay their mileage. So there are additional costs beyond that cost that they assume is already there. So sometimes we can make it match up and say, you're really paying more than you thought, and we really may not be as expensive as you thought, and somehow you make it match up.
Now, the towns that you serve, what are some of the health needs that the towns are expressing an interest in? And do they all sort of have a similarity as far as those needs? It seems like some of the towns are a bit on the rural side. I don't know if that makes a difference. Or...
Yeah, so I'm pretty honest, black and white about things. And when I talk to towns about what the needs are, a lot of times it's around liability. What is it that the town would be afraid of if they don't have a really thorough public health service available to them? Things like lead inspections, if they're not done properly. What's the risk of a child getting sick from a lead poisoning issue? What's the risk of a family member who has an illness passing it on to everybody else in town? What about that food worker who may make people sick at the school? So when you start talking about those things and saying, if those services aren't there, this is what we're facing, is that potential outbreak, that potential child getting sick, that other child getting sick who doesn't have to if we're able to manage a particular case. So I think that resonates real well with the towns. I think their goal obviously is to provide the best services for the residents, and clearly cost is always an issue. So if you can talk about the potential cost of not having those services in place, I think that is very often how we can kind of pull a little bit in our direction towards providing those services in the future.
Legislators, they just want to hear about how much it'll cost, right? Bottom line.
Well, I mean, I think that's a misnomer. I think the legislators are very concerned about their constituents, and they want to figure out how to provide the best services. But in our Yankee ways,
you have to work within a budget, right?
Yeah, and they also want to recognize the fact that towns have the ability to make a decision themselves. So legislators don't want to force the issue. I think the best thing we've done over the years is say, we're here if you need us. And I think when they respect that and they say, they're not there trying to sell a product, they're not there trying to force their services on us, I think in most cases the towns have respected that, and that's usually when they join. What we've said is, we're a partner in the community like a lot of agencies are, And we may not be in your town hall, but we want the town to recognize that we're your local health department, and that's our tagline, your local health department. Trying to explain what the Uncas Health District is very difficult, but saying we're your local health department really does affect people. They understand what that means.
Right.
We're here to help you. We want to support you. I've said, we're like an umpire at a baseball game. Until they screw up, nobody knows they're there.
Right.
And that's typically what the health department is like as well. If your neighbor's septic system is failing, really doesn't seem to bother you until it starts coming on your property. So we may be addressing it before it gets over to you, but you're going to really appreciate the fact we did our job.
That's
when we did it.
preventative, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. At this time of year, are you busier than any other time of year, or does it just different times of the year, just different things going on?
It's seasonal in terms of what we deal with. In the summertime, we're dealing with everything from flies and mosquitoes to the fall when we're starting to think about flu season. In the wintertime, obviously, we have other issues around people being in school together. You have that issue of no heat and housing. So some of those type of things, they come and they're cyclical. We know we can start preparing for people to have no heat probably around fall times, which is why we talk to some other agencies like TVCCA in our area to find out about heating assistance. And there's a lot of complications with a lot of the things we deal with. You may go into a home and they say they have no heat, and you say, well, who's your landlord? Geez, I don't know who my landlord is. I give a guy cash, and this is where I live. Well, does your lease say it's on you, or is it on the landlord? Geez, I don't know. I never really had a lease. Well, we got to get you heat, and we've got to do it as quick as we can, but we don't have that information. So there's a lot of research that goes into the work we do. We're really trying as hard as we can to respond as quickly as we can. But working through some of those things that come up, we've had everything from landlords turning heat off on tenants to tenants turning heat off on themselves. Everybody wants to be relocated, or they want to be moved out of a place that they don't feel like they like. But we remind people our job is to keep you safe and habitable. We don't want to move you. We want to make the place you're in to be safe. We want it to be a nice place. We want it to be a place you want to live in. So we're going to work to make the place better as opposed to just closing it down and moving you on your way.
We're going to take a break here in a second. I want you to give the website out for people to learn more.
Sure. So our website is www.uncas, UNCAS, like healthdistrict.org.
What's on the website?
Not that much anymore. We've thinned it out a little bit, and I think that's to people's advantage. What we try to do is put links to our forms, put contact information for our staff, and put emergency information on. The days of going onto a website and streaming through to try to find what you're looking for, we found that to be complicated. You can Google anything these days. What we really want you to do is have directions to our facilities, have access to our staff, and have the information you need about getting a form filled out. We don't want you to come into our office anymore if we can avoid it. We have smartphones just like anybody else does. We can scan things, we can email them to people, we can respond to an email any time of day. So we want people to know we're a resource that they can use any time of day, anywhere, all the time.
Patrick McCormick, the Director of Health for the Uncas Health District, thanks for spending a little time with us.
Anytime. I enjoyed being here.
We'll take a break and come back, and we'll get into the stuff like flu season and all those things when we come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We are chatting with the fine folks from the Uncas Health District. They serve Norwich, Montville, Basra, Sprague, Lisbon, and Griswold, part of Connecticut, but there are health districts all over. Sue Dubb is a public health nurse. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I think Patrick did a good job of describing a lot of what you do in the first segment, but if you would like to expound on that, as a public health nurse, what are some of your duties and responsibilities?
Well, as Patrick mentioned, we receive a good number of communicable disease reports from the state health department, and that can include things like foodborne illnesses such as salmonella, campylobacter, which we get with decent regularity. It can include things like the chicken pox or pertussis, also known as whooping cough, and so I review those on a daily basis to see what's out there in the communities. I'm actually in the process right now of developing a database based on towns and trying to see if certain diseases kind of merit some programmatic development specific to those towns. I also review lead cases. I've got about 50 kids right now that I'm following that have elevated blood lead levels. And that can be pretty intensive at times, making sure that you're coordinating, making sure the kids are getting their lab tests done, that they're getting into their doctors for regular checkups. We follow TB cases, make sure that we're getting the folks in for their appointments, their follow-up x-rays, things like that. And I do a lot of education, and right now I'm actually involved in a lot of flu shots.
Yeah.
It's the season.
It is the season indeed. I got mine last week. I'm like suffering through like a miserable cold right now, but that's not the same thing as the flu. And so it is flu season, correct?
It is.
And so let's talk about the flu. Let's talk about flu shots, maybe some misconceptions, because there are some people out there that are resistant to getting a flu shot. Why is that?
There are, and you know, there's several reasons. If they were somebody that was in a family that didn't have a strong belief in the flu vaccine, then they tend to kind of grow up and not get
Right.
the flu shot. I think some of the discussion surrounds the theory that somehow you can get autism from the vaccine. And so when somebody comes to me, especially if it's a group of people, and 3 out of the 4 are getting their flu shot and the 4th person isn't, I will say to them, and they usually claim, I've never gotten the flu shot. So I ask, why not? And they'll share their reasoning. But I try to dispel a lot of those myths, and I have, on several occasions, actually educated people enough that they say, oh, I didn't know that. And
So they
they've
changed their
agreed.
mind,
They've
yeah.
changed their mind and they've taken the flu shot.
I think one other reason is they think that somehow they can get the flu by getting the flu shot.
Right. And what I have to say to that is, you know, the flu vaccine, like any vaccine, there's a period of time before the vaccine becomes fully effective.
It's a couple of weeks.
It's about 10 to 14 days on average. And if you have somebody that just got their flu shot and they are exposed in the next couple of days to somebody who has the flu, then yes, you can still catch the flu because your flu vaccine hasn't kicked in yet. So I think once you explain that to people, because people are convinced, I got the flu right after I got the flu shot.
There really isn't any way that you can get it from the flu shot, right? Because it's
Correct.
right. So maybe some side effects might be a little soreness in the area, or
Yeah, a
maybe
little
a headache
redness,
or something.
little headache. The nasal mist, the kids tend to get a little bit of a stuffy nose, maybe a little bit of a headache, maybe a little bit of a sore throat. Most symptoms that people get after having the flu vaccination are usually short-lived, usually 24 to 48 hours at max. Adults, it's primarily maybe a feeling of achiness and usually soreness at the injection site.
Now, there are some people who can't get the flu shot just because of their being allergic to it, correct?
Absolutely. Anyone that's allergic to eggs traditionally has never been able to receive the flu vaccine. However, last year there was a new vaccine that came out on the market. It was called Flu Block, and it was actually developed right here in Connecticut by Protein Sciences in Meriden. And it is what they call a recombinant vaccine or a synthetic vaccine. So it's not developed in the traditional egg cultures that other flu vaccines are developed in, which allows a lot of people who previously couldn't get the vaccine to now be able to receive it. The other things we worry about are people that have allergies to certain antibiotics. People who have suppressed immune systems, people that are, you know, maybe on chemotherapy or taking medications because they've had an organ transplant. Folks like that, we worry about. We certainly want them to consult with their physician before they come and ask for a flu shot. Certainly any children that are asthmatic with the flu mist, the nasal mist, that's a contraindication for those kids. But for the kids that don't have any kind of respiratory issues, it's actually the best vaccine for them to get, especially for ages 2 to 9. The CDC even came out this year and said, this is the best vaccine your kid can get if they don't have asthma.
The mist, is that just an alternative to getting the needle in your arm? Is that basically what it is?
It is an alternative. However, the difference between the nasal mist and the injection is that there is actually live virus in the mist. It's a very weakened version of it, but it is live versus an inactivated form of the virus that's in the injection.
Nothing that your immune system wouldn't be able to handle, though.
As long as you don't have any compromise to your immune system.
And the way they usually do it is they'll develop based on like the strain each year. They'll kind of put like the top 2 strains in the vaccine based on what they presume will be the flu.
Right. Typically every year there's 3 strains at a minimum in the vaccine, and it's usually 2 A strains and 1 B strain. The last couple of years we've actually had what they call a quadrivalent formula, which actually has 2 A strains and 2 B strains. And you know, there's a committee that meets every year, and they look at what the circulating viruses have been out in the environment, and based on their best guess and a lot of science, they determine what should make the next formula for the next flu season.
But it's a formula that's worked for the most part.
It has. You know, we've actually had really good luck over the last few years.
So let's talk about some other, you know, in the news lately. Certainly Ebola has been in there.
Absolutely.
What can you tell us about it? What should people do? And what kind of precaution? I think the governor put out like standardized precautions around the state for medical facilities. Is that what was happening?
Right. We've certainly done a lot of education with our healthcare facilities, our first responder communities. The thing about Ebola is you cannot catch it unless the person has active symptoms. And so if they're vomiting, if they have diarrhea, those types of symptoms will be able to transmit the disease. If the person has had exposure to somebody with Ebola but is not yet themselves exhibiting symptoms, they cannot transmit the disease to somebody else. So the likelihood of you coming into contact with somebody here in the state of Connecticut with somebody that has active symptoms of Ebola is almost non-existent.
But, you know, it is a newsworthy thing, and people in the media has a tendency to hype things up to the point of,
They
you know,
do.
You know.
And, you know, the same thing happened during the H1N1 pandemic. I would say that probably 80% of what I did during that pandemic was dispelling a lot of the information that was in the media, the misinformation.
How about some other things like neuroviruses, because that's in the news a lot lately too?
Yeah, that is a nasty virus and takes such a tiny, tiny amount for it to transmit. And it is one of those viruses that just kind of goes like wildfire once it starts. But it's usually very short-lived. And unfortunately, other than washing your hands and staying home when you're sick, there's really not a lot to stop it. There's not medications that we can give you. You know, if you have a bacterial infection, we can give you an antibiotic. But with norovirus, it's really, you have to kind of let it run its course and try to keep yourself hydrated. But
what are some of the symptoms of that?
Vomiting and diarrhea, typically.
So it kind of feels like some of the other viruses, the flu even.
A lot of these viruses are, you hit the nail on the head, very similar. They have cold or flu-like symptoms when they start. And unless you have a special test done, a lot of times you can't differentiate between the two. And norovirus is one of those viruses that we know is out there. We may test 1 or 2 people if there seems to be an outbreak. Once it's confirmed, there's no need to test everybody.
Yeah. Let's talk about, excuse me, germs. And I would imagine the same, you know, common sense things still hold true. Wash your hands a lot.
Absolutely.
Don't touch your face a lot with your hands.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of a little bit of a germaphobe anyway. I'm not a big fan of shaking hands. I don't know if that really is a good way to transmit germs, but talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, I think the thing that I'm going to compare this to is, you know, the fire service actually has a great history of giving messages to kids that stick with you for a lifetime. Who doesn't know stop, drop, and roll?
Right.
We would love the public health mantra to be cover your cough, wash your hands, and stay home when you're sick and get your flu shot. That's a lot to stick into one little message. But if we could get people to remember that the way they remember stop, drop, and roll, we'd be well ahead of the game. Certainly, you know, germs are everywhere. Viruses are everywhere. And keeping your hands clean, washing them often, washing them thoroughly, and in the absence of soap and water, using hand sanitizer, certainly goes a long way to preventing illness and transmission of it. And there are two ways that you can contract the illness. A lot of times it's with direct contact. So if I cough and I cough into your face, it's a direct transmission. But if I cough into my hands and then I use your pen, and then I say, oh, could you sign that for me?
I'm not gonna
My
touch that
germs are
now.
on that pen
Yeah.
now. So it's kind of like a germ tag game. That's an indirect transmission. And the easiest way to break both of them is hand washing.
There you
So,
go. I've already had my flu shot, but my director hasn't. So we're going to force him into this chair and get him a flu shot next before we wrap up the show. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. So that is just about our show for today, although as I mentioned in the last segment, I've already gotten my flu shot this year. So we've dragged our director, Aaron, over to sit in a chair and get a flu shot. He doesn't have a microphone. So basically a flu shot, it's pretty simple. Basically, you just jab them right in the arm with it. No?
it
No.
is. Of course, as we mentioned in the last segment, hand sanitizing
Very important.
is the important piece.
Or
here.
have gloves on, right?
Absolutely. The infection control guidelines say that we do not have to wear gloves to do injections in the arm. So I do sanitize in between. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you roll up your sleeve here. And we're looking for your deltoid muscle. So
Well, you're not going to
that's
find
the
that.
that's the preferred site. And we're just going to clean the skin a little bit with some alcohol. And we'll let that dry for a second so it doesn't sting too much. And this is the trivalent vaccine. This one in particular is put out by BioCSL, and it's called Afluria. And it has 2 A strains and 1 B strain. And it's going to take about 10 to 14 days for it to be fully effective. And we're going to have you take a big breath. And that's it.
Man, I got to tell you, I enjoyed watching that.
I'm going to put that on there for you, and I'm going to ask you to hold that for 1 second. And we have a great Donald Duck Band-Aid for you to recognize your bravery today.
It's like when you just came out of the voting poll, you get an I voted sticker.
And you can put that right on the tabletop there, and we will put your Band-Aid in place.
And again, a typical virus, flu vaccine, anywhere
There
from
you
10
go.
to 14 days before
Absolutely.
the antibodies really kick in, right?
Right. So you want to avoid anybody that's looking sick in the next 10
Right
to
here,
14
looking
days.
right at me.
And you should have no problem. What I will have you do is move your arm around for a few minutes. That'll help distribute the vaccine around in your muscle and decrease the likelihood that it's going to be sore later today.
And there you go. It's as simple as that, right?
It's as simple as that.
We'll
One,
put-
two, three.
We'll put the website graphic up on the screen one more time, but Sue Dubb, public health nurse for the Uncas Health District, thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thanks to our director, Aaron, for being the man today. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. We will see you next time. Take care.